So I will go ahead and get started with my slides for listing suppressions. So, all right, so listing suppressions can happen for a number of reasons. There are words that will trigger the Amazon algorithm or the bots, and they will close down your listing. Unfortunately, we don't know what all of those words are. Amazon doesn't tell us, but we do at ZonGuru have a list of words that we recommend that you avoid. And if you reach out to us in support, we can give you that PDF that has a pretty comprehensive list of words that you might want to stay away from. Some of the more common ones that we see are things like antibacterial, biodegradable, compostable, detoxify, eco-friendly, and non-toxic. So those words and a heap more can get your listing suppressed. And fixing that can be really difficult because sometimes when your listing's suppressed, you can't even access it in Seller Central. So I'm going to show you a really great way that you can fix that if you find yourself in that situation. And I actually know someone who this happened to, and ZonGuru was a saving grace for them. Additionally, you cannot use competitor brand names. Now, there are exceptions to this. Like if you're selling a mobile phone case and it's suitable for iPhones, you can say that it's suitable for iPhones or compatible with iPhones. You just have to be very careful how you phrase it so it doesn't trigger the bots. All right, so if your listing has been suppressed, do not fear. Listing Optimizer can help. So the friends of mine who had a problem, they had a word that was in violation and it closed down their listing. They could not access it through Seller Central, but they could get into Listing Optimizer. They identified the word in their listing, they pulled it out, and they used the publish to Amazon. It published and went straight in and was no problem whatsoever. So it fixed it and they were back up and running in no time. All right, now another feature in ZonGuru that can really help you out with your product listings and let you know that something is going on is Product Pulse. So if you're on a seller plan, you can tick the boxes on several different values on your own listing to alert you to changes, and you can get notified by email or it can show up on the business dashboard graph. So you could let it know if the number of sellers changes. That could let you know that someone has hijacked it, but it can also let you know if your category has changed or if it has been classified as an adult product. And I know someone recently who has a product who is absolutely not selling an adult product, but it was reclassified. So those are things that you want to know if that happens, and you can catch it and fix it and address it as soon as possible. And Product Pulse can help you do that. So your Product Pulse alerts, if they show up on your business dashboard, they're going to show up these little pink dots, and you can click on them and it will open up a little bubble and show you exactly what it is that's happened. So you can alert this, set this to alert you for yourself, for your own listings, or for competitor listings. All right, so see here an example of what it looks like when you go to Product Pulse and open it up. You can see the old category, and now you can see the new category. So this chair has been reclassified as a video game chair, not just a computer gaming chair. All right. So let me see, is David, if you are in the room, raise your hand and I will bring you on screen and we will get started with your presentation for account suspensions and how you can prevent that or handle those if they happen. There we go. Can you hear me, David? Can you speak so we can hear you? There we go. Hi, David.
Hi, Kimberly. Sorry about that. It made me run through a quick little test to log in, but I was sitting in.
Perfect. All right. Well, I will bring up your slides so we can get started. Oh, all right, it's going to take me just a second. So while I'm getting this started, I had them loaded and they've gone away. So let me get them back in. And while we're doing that, you go ahead and get started with anything you wanted to share about your background and your specialty in handling account suspensions.
Sure, absolutely. So, as everyone knows, I'm an attorney. So I specialize in all things e-commerce, right? So I assist with account suspensions and listing suspensions. It can be both legal and non-legal. So I handle trademark, copyright, and patent disputes, and all other types of Amazon-related suspensions. So that includes inauthentics, you sold as news, related accounts. Even seen my fair share of forged document cases, as well as drop shipping, review manipulation, and a slew of other issues as well.
It doesn't take much to get yourself suspended in Amazon, does it?
It does not. I've seen some sellers get suspended, several times. But I've noticed that after that first suspension, it does become a bit more difficult each time. So if you can avoid it at all, at all costs, that's what you want to do. So that's what I'm here to discuss today. How to spot some common issues that I typically see, as well as hopefully helping to prevent. And if you are ever hit with the suspension, how to address it.
Perfect. All right. So I think I'll have to run the slides for you. So if you need me to forward on a slide, just let me know. But I'll let you run with this. So
Sure. Appreciate it. So, as I mentioned, we're going to discuss how to prevent and resolve Amazon suspensions. The first and probably the most common, I'm using them interchangeably here, even though inauthentics and use sold as new are two different types of issues technically, but I've seen them, Amazon kind of mix and match them. So that's why I put them together here. So, first, I want to discuss common issues that come up and tips to avoid them, right? So, thoroughly vetting your suppliers. Sounds obvious. I've said it so many times over the years, but you'd be real surprised at how many sellers don't really do that, or they're not careful about who they select to be their suppliers. And one big thing that I've noticed over the years is Amazon is huge with making sure that these suppliers have an online presence. So if there's a supplier, however you get into contact with them, and they don't have a website, or it just looks very unprofessional, but they're offering a great deal, there's usually a reason why. So you want to be really, really careful. I always say that Amazon is really, it's a long-term game. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So if you could kill it for a month, that's great. But if you're suspended after a month, then have zero income for, it could be months and months after that, or even longer. So really, really important to double and triple and quadruple check your suppliers. Now, I want to discuss messages, customer messages, and negative feedback. So, a common issue with inauthentics and you sold as new when customers leave negative responses on your listings, right? So, negative feedback, I'm talking about. Now, if it's one or two and you've sold hundreds or thousands of the product, it's not going to kill you, right? But it's always important to monitor them, because if one customer had that problem, it's possible multiple others will. It could have been a bad batch, it could have been maybe a mistake. It's always important to monitor them. For example, if you're selling a product that has an expiration date and a customer or two complains that it was expired, it's really something you want to make sure that that's not a continuous problem and why it happened. So monitor them. You don't have to panic, of course, every negative review that comes through, but it's something that you really, really want to be careful with. And in addition to expired products, shipping problems are another big one. I've seen where it's not at it's not of the fault of the seller at all. It's a shipment carrier where the products become damaged, and now you have to deal with the mess. So there's a wide variety of things that can occur. Sometimes I've seen where Amazon takes responsibility themselves. That's when you'll see them cross out the negative feedback that anybody leaves. But again, you really just want to make sure if it's a product with an expiration date, you want to continuously monitor them, and products that are possibly damaged, especially products that are very easily damaged. If you're selling anything that can easily be broken, for example, you want to double and triple check the packaging. Now, before you're joining your listings, I think that this is another really important tip, and I've seen many sellers get confused about it over the years. you really have to make sure that your products match exactly what you're listing. So often there's a listing and it looks very, very similar to another product. I've confused them myself, get 100% guilty. So I see how it happens because sometimes it's a tiny little difference. It's a different model number. It's a different year. You have to make sure that it matches exactly. Now, if it's another brand name, of course, it's not something you want to list on. You want to be extremely careful about products that you're listing on, especially when the product is already in Amazon's system when you're joining the listing. I've seen many times where the listing creator is the one that actually makes the mistake, and all the sellers that join the listing, for example, say the product packaging was updated. If the listing creator doesn't update that listing himself, if people complain about it, Amazon flags those listings all the time. So just something to be aware of, to always make sure that you're listing on the appropriate listing. And
Yeah,
you can
I
go.
had something similar happen to myself. I was buying something for my phone and I was looking at multiple listings, and I ended up accidentally buying the one that was for an Android phone and not an iPhone. So I just sent it back. I didn't leave a bad review, but that can happen really easily, especially when you're comparing things and trying to find exactly the right thing.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I've done it myself. I've seen how it becomes it's a very easy mistake to make. But everyone's not as nice as you. Some people will leave negative reviews, and it can really impact seller accounts. So I always say just try and put yourself in the best position so that you leave it out of their hands to write a negative review. Of course, anybody can write one at any time, but most people are honest. So if you deliver the exact product that they think they're buying, you should get a 5-star review, or at least not a negative one.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, so business verification. So this has been an issue on Amazon for a while, and so many sellers are banging themselves over the head trying to figure out what Amazon wants and why it's not working. So I want to start with opening up new accounts. Now, that's typically the more common way that these come up. So sometimes I find that in Europe, it seems to be European sellers run into these issues the most. Um, Not exactly sure why. I think there's a few possible reasons. But when you're opening up a new account, you have to make sure you have all of the proper documents. Now, I think a big part of it is not having the initial documents that Amazon requests. So I have a list here of a business license, a bill dated within 90 days, a bank statement, and a credit card on file. Now, the most important thing to always look out for is to make sure that everything matches across these documents. So if a name is inconsistent on the business license versus the bank statement, very likely there could be a problem. Same thing with addresses. Um, you have to make sure that all of the information matches. Sometimes you have to go through it very carefully, even lay it out. Most people don't really print hard copy anymore. I still find that that's easiest for me because I can see everything in front of me rather than, keeping a million tabs open. But that's typically the main reason why Amazon denies these issues. Another one is older accounts coming back to play. So an older account that you created, and later down the line you try and create a new one, and Amazon flags it. So when it's an older account, you really want to make sure that if you're changing any information on there, that you let Amazon know about it. Now, Amazon doesn't require that anymore, but it's always something that I recommend. And I always say, if you don't absolutely have to change information on your business account, there's really no reason to do it. If there's an absolute need for it, go right ahead. I get it. I just say be really careful because it's not absolutely necessary. I would just avoid it. I've seen minor things cause significant problems for sellers. At the end of the day, sometimes it's just really not worth the headache. So I'd like to go to the next slide because I want to discuss a bit further, and then we'll also get into related accounts. So I mentioned this about info not matching, and just being very careful when changing any information on existing accounts. And we can go to the next slide as well. Okay, so related accounts. This is often tied with business verification suspensions. So when you're suspended, when a seller creates another account using the same information as a previous one. Now, as I mentioned before, you used to need approval for a second account. Now, that's not the case anymore, but it was for a long time. But that doesn't mean that Amazon is still not giving people headaches about some of these issues that come up. Now, like I said, you used to have to need approval for that account, but now Amazon is saying that if you have a legitimate business reason for creating the second account, then it's okay. Now, a big part of the problem is a lot of people aren't sure what a legitimate business need is. And again, it's going to be an overall theme here, I think, today. But if you don't absolutely need a second account, again, I'd be really, really careful. I wouldn't do it, but I understand that people are in different situations, and sometimes it's needed. And you are allowed to do it on Amazon. It's just you have to be careful about how you go about it. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so common ways that accounts are linked. These are the most common. So Wi-Fi and IP addresses. Okay, now, like I said, even though you're allowed to do it, sometimes Amazon flags you anyway. Okay, anytime there's a credit card, a bank account, email addresses, names, phone numbers, for example, ways that Amazon links accounts. Now, back to our legitimate business need discussion, keeping categories of the product separate, absolutely vital. That's what you want to make sure. So if you're selling t-shirts with one store, but you're selling electronics in another, shouldn't be a problem. Either way, you want to make sure all the accounts, entirely separate business entities, entire different information, different credit cards, different email addresses, bank accounts, addresses. You want everything to be completely separate. And lastly, I would get seller support approval in writing. I can't tell you how many times Amazon has allowed a second account, even with seller support approving it over the phone. The seller creates a second account, and guess what happens? They get suspended anyway. So the way to counteract this is to ask seller support in writing, get it confirmed in writing. Now, some people may think that's a bit overkill, but I've seen it happen so many times that I don't think so. It's a very quick thing to do. And then if you're ever suspended for related accounts, you can show Amazon that approval in writing. If it's over the phone, not much you can do about it.
Yeah, you got it. And even over the phone, like I had an instance, it had nothing to do with this, but someone had told me one thing over the phone and I didn't write down his name. And then when it didn't happen, I'm going back and like, well, who did you speak with? I'm like, I don't know.
Yep. That's the problem. That's the problem. And it's scary because you want to just take their word for it. And it's something I never would have known except just being in this business for years and just seeing the issue come up so many times. So that's why I bring that advice. Okay, so intellectual property infringement. Now, there is a lot that goes under this umbrella. So I broke them down into the four main types: trademarks, counterfeits, copyrights, and patents. So let's start off with trademarks first. Okay, so the first thing I want to discuss is what a trademark is, right? I'm going to be brief on this, but essentially it's a word, a phrase, a symbol, or a logo that's used to identify your goods and distinguish them from one seller from those of another. So anytime you see the Nike logo or the McDonald's logo there, you know exactly the brand, you know what you're getting, right? So what you want to do, what you want to avoid is using well-known brand names in listings if you're not actually selling them. Now, a big problem is when sellers sell generic products and they're listed on branded listings. That's of course a big problem, right? I'll use Nike as an example, but if you're selling a Nike product, or if you're not actually selling a Nike product, but you're selling it on a Nike listing, Well, Nike has brand approval, so that'd be tough to do anyway. But just by sake of example, that would be grounds for trademark infringement, right? Because if you're not actually selling Nike, you're confusing customers to believe that they are, right? So that's the main question you always want to ask is, does this create confusion as to the source of the goods? Now, that's a very extreme and obvious example, but sometimes it's not so obvious. There are other ways to get around, trademark infringement. There's lots of exceptions to the general rule. And the general rule is called the first sale doctrine, right? So you're allowed to buy and resell legitimate, unaltered items. So if you go to Walmart, you pick something off the shelf, there is no problem with reselling it because that first sale was already created from Walmart to you. You're allowed to resell it. No confusion, no trademark infringement. Now, where issues arise are when someone is selling a product, maybe it's their own brand, maybe it's a private label, and they use certain terms to describe their own product. Okay. Now, this is called descriptiveness, right? So I put some examples here to kind of hammer home those points, right? So, for example, if you're selling a TV, say there was a brand called Crystal Clear, was the name of a brand, and you're selling a TV and you're referring to that TV as a Crystal Clear TV. Now, the brand Crystal Clear may say, that's trademark infringement. You're using our brand name. Now, in response, what you can say is that the product is merely descriptive. You're describing the type of TV. It's a crystal clear one. So this is, some of the gray area, but this is a common defense when these types of issues come up. Same sort of thing with ice cream. If you're calling, a certain ice cream brand, you're referring to your own as cold and creamy. If there's an actual cold and creamy brand, that's why in these examples, these are not very strong trademarks, even though they get registered all the time, very weak ones like this. But they're vulnerable to these sorts of counter arguments. So this is just some general advice that if you're looking, normally you don't really want to be so in the gray area, but I think these are very good lessons to learn because a lot of e-com sellers believe that someone owns a word, for example. That's just not the case. If you were able to just, create ownership of words, how would we ever describe anything on Amazon, on eBay? It'd be very difficult. If I wanted to say, oh, it's a clear TV, oh, someone owns Clear. If I want to say, oh, it's a crystal clear, oh, someone owns Crystal Clear. You see the problem that's created very, very quickly. So this is one thing that the USPTO, WIPO, UK IPO, EU IPO, these are all common issues that they understand and acknowledge. So it's just possible to, defend against some of these types of claims. Now, the last bullet point, I want to talk about when you do actually receive a complaint, right? In this example, a trademark complaint, the first step, Amazon will always tell you to reach out to the rights owner to try and request a retraction, right? So that's when a lot of lawyers, write letters on their own letterhead to try and work out, either try and demand a retraction or work out some sort of agreement. Now, that's the first step. You can always appeal with Amazon if that's unsuccessful, and you can even possibly cancel a trademark. For example, one that's very weak, like one of the examples I just provided, there's several different reasons for it. So once a trademark is registered, that doesn't mean that they're never under attack again. It could still be canceled. So even after it's registered, there's usually a 5-year waiting period in most countries for when you can still cancel a trademark. So it's something to be aware of, that if another branded name is really impacting you, it's something to be aware of. Now, it doesn't always make sense to fight it. If it's one product that you're selling and it's not even a big one, then it doesn't make sense. But if it's a common issue, like if you're in the TV business and you want to describe crystal clear and someone else is attacking you for that, then it's a different situation.
Yeah, when I got my trademark, I have a generic word as part of my trademark, and the USPTO came back and said, we'll let you trademark the phrase, the 2 words, but we can't protect you for just this 1 word. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough, no problem. So, that's, I was fully aware that that could happen. But yeah, so I guess this is also kind of a lesson too. And when you're coming up with your brand names, to make sure that you're not going too really generic and it's not a strong, unique trademark.
Exactly. Exactly. And a lot of trademarks will also come with disclaimers like the one you mentioned. And sometimes some companies try and abuse that where they don't use it accurately, or it's a two-worded trademark and they try and attack you for using one of the words. There's all different situations. But yeah, that's exactly right. This teaches private label brands to really think about the brand names they create. The best kind is a word that didn't even exist. That's not in the English dictionary, but that's there's different levels of distinctiveness. It doesn't have to be, but those are always strong because no one can claim anything. It's a word that didn't exist before. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something you want to think about long and hard before filing for registration.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so counterfeit accusations. Now, this is a type of trademark infringement, right? So, if you're selling a counterfeit product, you're also infringing on a trademark. But the reverse is not true. So, if you're selling a counterfeit product, you are infringing on a trademark, but if you're infringing on a trademark, you're not necessarily selling a counterfeit product. Now, counterfeit is just a more serious accusation than trademark infringement. It really comes down to intent. That's when you're intending to deceive mainly. So that's, we've all seen counterfeit accusations. I live in New York City, and when I walk down Canal Street, I'm seeing Gucci bags for $20. I don't think they're real Gucci bags. Otherwise, they'd be losing. It's about a 10,000% markdown right there. So, just a classic example of counterfeit products. But again, vetting your suppliers to avoid these types of issues is going to be vital. Very similar to inauthentic. And what some may be wondering is what's the difference between counterfeit and inauthentic, right? Because it sounds interchangeable. They're similar, but the difference is in terms of Amazon. Counterfeit is intellectual property related. So a rights owner is filing, accusing you of selling a counterfeit product. Inauthentic, there's no one actually filing it. It has to do with either customers complaining about it, that it's inauthentic, or Amazon flagging it directly. So there's no rights owner that's actually accusing you like there is in counterfeit. So this is even more serious. Now, again, you really want to make sure about a web presence. That's just absolutely vital. I see it so often, and I'm able to spot it before, very often I'm not actually looking at the specific product. If someone's being accused of counterfeit, if I am helping a seller enforce their IP rights, I request test buy so I can see what's counterfeit and what's not. I'll compare the two products and you could see if they're identical. Sometimes it's very good counterfeits, but when you're being accused of it, it can be difficult to prove because Amazon you're not shipping the products to them, or it's most of the time you're not. So it could take time by the time you get the product, by the time you show them the difference. It's a lot easier when you have a great supplier that has all the information that Amazon wants. So again, if there's no website, or if the company name isn't even on the invoice, or a simple Google search shows that the address on Google is different than the invoice, all red flags, and it's usually not a great sign. I also am a big fan of Google Images. You could see the warehouse. If it's an open field and nothing is there, again, probably not the best sign. All right, so copyright. Now, copyright law has a very unique response when these are filed, right? So first, what is copyright? It's an original work of authorship that's fixed in a tangible medium of expression. So what is that, right? It's a bit of a mouthful. All it really is someone who created an original work, and in some way they got it on paper. So it doesn't protect an idea, right? So you'll notice something that's common with a song, a photo, a poem, a book, or a painting. All of it was actually either written or drawn. These are all creative works that were created by somebody. Okay. Now, you don't actually have to register with the US Copyright Office, but there are multiple advantages to doing that. Now, some of the most common ones are just in being able to enforce it if you are a copyright owner, and also with filing litigation. You have to have a copyright registration now in order to file that. Now, on the other side of things, if we're defending against a copyright complaint, the most common issues that come up, photographs and verbiage. So very, very simple here. If you take someone else's photo and use it on your listing, that's a no-no, and that is going to get flagged. You're going to have to deal with a copyright claim. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. There's plenty of platforms that offer, I think, even free, but some very, very small fee subscriptions where you're free to use their photos. Just be very careful. It's not worth it. It's the most common reason that sellers get flagged. The second is verbiage. Usually this is related to the description. So if there's some sort of instruction manual or some way of describing the product, sometimes people don't want to change some of the words. It's basically just like plagiarizing for back in the classroom days. So don't just copy and paste the paragraph. Put your own spin on it, even if you're using something else as a way of relating to it or just as a guideline. Just be careful. Don't copy it. Now, Amazon is very unique with copyright because of the listings that are created. Amazon tells sellers not to create their own listings if the product already exists. So if you're selling a product that already exists, you're not supposed to create your own listing. Now, how does this work in terms of copyright, right? So if you're joining a listing, I have here that if you're joining a listing, Amazon grants what's called the perpetual license to use that intellectual property. So if I create a listing, I create a photo, you are allowed to join that listing without me being able to claim that you're infringing on my copyright. Very different than a lot of other platforms. Like for eBay, for example, it's one seller for one listing. Amazon is, of course, not like that. So it's very different. And some sellers aren't aware of that. I've seen where some copyright owners will try and enforce it because they think that they own the listing. That's just not how Amazon works.
So does copyright apply to, like, if someone has like a tagline that's a particular phrase that wouldn't necessarily fall under trademark, but can they copyright something like that?
Usually you can't just copyright a few words. So if it's a short phrase, it's usually a trademark. Copyright just has to have some minimal level of creativity. So if it's a couple of words, it's going to be tougher. Copyright in general is a pretty low bar for what's registered, but they don't really want to mess around with just people copywriting a couple of words. Usually it's more of a trademark.
Cool.
But in response, when copyright, my last point on copyrights is when a copyright complaint is filed, a lot of sellers wonder what to do, right? So of course, I always recommend the first step is reach out to the rights owner on your own, see if you can handle it on your own. If not, then you can always turn to an attorney, someone who, another Amazon expert, an IP expert. But if that is unsuccessful, reaching out to the rights owner, and you've even tried appealing it and that doesn't work, the next step, what's advisable some of the time and not always, is what's called the DMCA counter notice. That stands for Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Now, this is how it works, and some sellers are a bit scared to mess around with it because essentially what you're doing is you're inviting a lawsuit. So a copyright complaint is filed against you. If you submit a counter notice, you are basically saying, put up or shut up. I'm giving you 10 business days to file a lawsuit. If you don't do it, then the content is going to be automatically reinstated. Now, Amazon is supposed to reinstate it after 10 business days. So again, that starts the clock. It tells them, okay, I believe that this is not infringing and you're swearing under penalty of perjury. They also swore under penalty of perjury when they filed the complaint. And 9 times out of 10, the individual or the company that filed the complaint isn't going to follow through, and they're not going to file a lawsuit. So that's a way it's very effective of getting copyright complaints cleanly removed from your account. Now, this only applies to copyright. So it's only something that you can use when you get a copyright complaint, not for trademarks, not for patents, not for counterfeits, but it's a very useful tool, and it's just something that I think everyone should be aware of. All right, let's get into patents here. So this is always a fun one. I usually get the most questions, I would say, about patents. But okay, so 3 main points here, right? So it's a license issued by the government. They work hand in hand with, in the United States, it's the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So they work together, and Copyright Office is separate. And there's 2 main types, right? So there's design patents and there's utility patents. Okay, so utility patents, I'm going to keep this very simple because it gets very complex. I don't think it's quite necessary here, so I'm going to be very concise. So a utility patent protects the way an article works. A design patent protects the way it looks. Now, in short, utility patents are the ones that everyone's always thinking of when they hear patent. If I'm not sure if anyone watches Shark Tank, but anytime they talk about patents pending, most of the time it's a utility patent. They do have design patents on there every now and then also. But any invention, when you're inventing some sort of new process or machine, like a toaster I have here as an example, that's a utility patent. Now, when it's a design, when it's a new look of a product, so it's a new style, maybe you change the style of it, like a Mickey Mouse toaster, that's a design patent. So in short, utility patents are very expensive and they're much harder to get. I think about 90% of utility patent applications are denied. It's the exact opposite for design patents. About 90% are accepted. So that tells you right there how much easier it is to get a utility patent. It's quite frustrating because utility patents are very expensive. So it's something you really have to look into before, and this is something that is very difficult for someone to file on their own. Trademarks and copyrights are a lot easier, more simple. These are very complex. A lot goes into this. There's a lot of searching beforehand, and it's also not absolute, right? So once you have a patent, it doesn't exist forever. That's what those years in parentheses are. It's only for 20 years for utility patents and 15 years for design patents.
Is that from the time that it's approved or from the time that the application is filed?
From the time it's filed. So it's almost a little bit less, really. But yes, and a common, I don't have it in the slide, but a common response, especially with design patents, is sometimes design patents are approved, but there was a product that was very similar. And what causes these searches is sometimes a design patent owner will file a complaint against a third party, and that party says, I've been selling this product for 5 years before this product even was applied for. This patent was filed in 2020. I've been selling this for 2015. So if it's really close and it is actually infringing, it's not because I created this first. And that's a completely valid argument. So again, just because something is registered with whatever IP office, whatever country you're in, it doesn't mean that there's no way around it. They have an application, they have a registration, it's over. That's never the case. It doesn't mean that you're not infringing, of course, but it's absolutely not the case. So in a situation like that, if you created the product, even though you didn't file for a design patent, and let's say it's exactly the same, let's go with that, but you created it 5 years before the current patent owner filed for it, that's grounds for canceling the design patent. That's an invalid design patent. And this isn't something that's necessarily that uncommon. People think it is. It happens all the time where the government makes a mistake with registering that patent or any other form of IP. So that's why it's always worth examining, because you may not have to stop selling the product. You may not have done anything wrong. So if it's your own product, you really want to make sure that there's no patent registered before the product is sold. And that sounds simple. It's not so simple when it comes to patents. At least in the US, it's not super user friendly, at least the USPTO, in terms of searching for patents. But I'm not going to get into all the specifics here, but it's something that you or your lawyer or someone should review before a product hits the market, especially when we're talking about, a new invention. Now, if it's not your own product, and this happens as well, you're getting the product from a supplier. If it seems like it's something that's unique, you should ask the supplier rather, if they have a patent themselves or if they have a license to it. Because if something's very unique and they can't really answer any questions on it, you really have to go into that mode where it's like, okay, let me do some research to make sure this isn't the case, because patents are more difficult to get removed on Amazon. And what Amazon's currently doing is they're requesting non-infringement letters in response to these cases often. So they want to see either a court order or a non-infringement letter that's drafted by an attorney to prove, or to at least show, that the patent is not infringing. Cool. So I put a screenshot here of just some common. This is directly from Amazon's IP page, and I'm not going to go over everything, but I just wanted to show that what Amazon has on their own page. Now, sometimes Amazon says things and they don't always follow through. Like if you look at that first one where it says, for a product you never listed, just reply and say you never listed the product. I can tell you firsthand that they're not always so easy about that. Let's just say that, because you could show them no sales, you could show them the screenshots. Just for some reason, it takes them a bit to actually reinstate. But I want to point out, under copyright infringement at the bottom here, here's what I'm referring to when I say you may file a counter notice under the DMCA. Now, that's, there's a few different ways you can send that. It used to be where Amazon always wanted it sent to counter-notice@amazon.com. Now they more commonly have you submit it right through your account health. My suggestion is do both.
Cool. All right. So if the worst happens.
So everything we've spoken about before are common issues that come up, right? And what to do if you're not sure on, how to proceed. Now, this is the worst case scenario, where now we're not talking about the issue that is, may come up. Now it's actually, you were suspended, your account is suspended. Now, I'm assuming most know that Amazon requests a plan of action, and there's three main components that they almost always ask for, right? The root cause, your corrective actions, and your preventative measures. So your root cause is exactly that. What caused this specific issue? Now, I always tell sellers that this is probably the most important one, because if you just say that you have no idea, Amazon doesn't like to hear that. They want you to take accountability. If you're really not sure, then it may be time to talk to somebody to see, like, okay, what could have caused it? But I would say about 90% of the time, when a seller is suspended, they have an idea. Whether they agree with it or not is one thing, but they have an idea what caused it. Okay, so that's the best advice I can give, is be accountable and be upfront about it. Doesn't mean you have to admit to anything, but you can use certain language to show, like, okay, this may have happened. We may be able to do this better next time. And that leads me into corrective actions. That's how you have fixed this current issue. So if it's a used sold as new issue and you accidentally listed a product as new when it was really used, then you could say, okay, I looked into this. The product actually is used, or it was damaged. It was our mistake. We have, vetted everything. We've checked all of our inventory, and we know that this product is okay now. Preventative measures is more about looking to the future to make sure that it's never going to occur again, that you fix this problem, not just this particular issue, but how you fix it as a whole. So if we're talking about intellectual property, a good one is, oh, I consulted with my lawyer. I hired a lawyer. They're going to analyze every single IP complaint that I ever receive. These are just examples of things that not only you should be doing, but things that Amazon likes to hear. So those are the three main components, and they, the specific content that goes into them, I tried to give a few different examples across different areas, but it really is very dependent based on the particular issue. There are some more common ones, of course, like vetting your suppliers and training your staff and things like that. But you always want to make sure there's tons of, I've seen so many templated responses that are just all over the internet. And I've seen the same ones just come up over and over again. And a lot of times they just get rejected because they don't really address the issue. If it's a trademark issue, a review manipulation plan of action, POA, is not, it's not really going to work. Amazon's going to read right into it. So I just have some brief guidelines here also. So clear and concise, absolutely vital. You shouldn't be sending a 10 or 15 page plan of action. Amazon's not going to read it. They don't want to read it. They're just not going to read it. There's no specific limit, minimum or maximum. I would say in general, the sweet spot is 2 to 3 pages tops, but it could be even less, just if it's enough to, you're not trying to fill up the page or make things more complicated. In fact, it's the opposite. You want to make it very simple. You want to highlight important points. I like to use bold, underlined areas. Don't create a lot of fluff. Amazoners don't hide the ball into the middle of the plan. It should be big and bold and should be very obvious. Of course, you want to provide evidentiary support. So any sort of screenshot that you may have or any sort of evidence to either show that the claim is incorrect or some mistake, some sort of error has happened, you want to show that. Don't just say it, show it. That's always the question I ask when someone says, oh, they accuse me of counterfeit. They're not counterfeit. It's like, okay, can I have an invoice? Oh, well, I don't have one. So how do you know it's not counterfeit? The short answer is you probably don't. No one could know that. How would anyone know? So, examples like that, you could say it's not counterfeit till you're blue in the face, but if you don't have any evidence to support it, it's going to be tough. That's just the, those are just the facts of how e-commerce works, especially Amazon. Last, emotional appeals. I've seen horror stories with, in appeals, and just people are in, a rough situation, and it could be, a family issue or whatever the case is. The sad truth is Amazon is not going to care about any sort of emotional appeal. So I understand the thought process, but unfortunately it's just something that I have to recommend to avoid, because I've never seen that actually work. So you have to just act like Amazon is robotic and they're not going to care. So those are my guidelines on POAs.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was really, really enlightening. And does anyone have any questions? We have a few minutes left. We could answer some questions if anyone has any. But I think that was, a lot of really actionable things. If you ways to prevent it, things to make sure that you're looking out for, just to head it off, and then ways to fix it if it happens. So it may take a second if anyone has any questions to pop in, but really appreciate this. This is really great. Thank you very much for joining us. I know it's a little bit late over there for you right now.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm a night owl. It's almost 9 o'clock over here. So I think you're in Perth, right? It's like the furthest part of the world from us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're the person that told me, like, New York to Perth, you couldn't be further apart on the planet than these two places.
I know, it's pretty funny, but hey, with a virtual world, it's a lot easier to keep in touch, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I don't think we have any questions, but thank you again very much for this. I learned a lot, and I think it's been really beneficial. So thanks a lot. If anyone has any other questions or anything comes up, feel free to just call out to us in support, either in the chat bubble or just support@zonguru.com. And if anyone needs David's details, we could be happy to forward those on to you as well. Hopefully no one will need these details though.
Hopefully not. I never get the good phone calls.
Oh, thanks so
All
much for
right.
your time, David.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.